we've had apologies from Councillor Swift, Councillor Scullion, Councillor Robinson, and Councillor Pandor, for whom Councillor Scott is substituting.
Agenda item 5 is the internal audit progress report, standard agenda item, and members are asked to consider progress against the current plan for 22-23 and then also the quality assurance plan. So reading the papers, I was pleased to see that there are no overdue management actions. I think that's really good. And also that steps are being taken to secure additional audit support. So I think that's a real positive. But Bron, can you just update us, please, on progress with the procurement and also draw our attention to anything else of note in the paper?
Thank you, Chair. So, good news on the recruitment front. We have managed to secure half a person as a senior auditor, so that leaves us with 1.5 vacant posts. The procurement is underway at the moment, and we've just had an increase in the tolerances on our contract standing orders. So we're hoping to actually expedite that a little bit more quickly than we thought we would have to. So we're hoping to get some specific project and contract management support in to do a sort of a little rolling programme of reviews around that, which will hopefully really push the kind of the volume of work up to the level that we're hoping for. So I love starting with good news, and that is good news because you know how hard it has been to recruit to date. So the work against the plan, we are way behind where we would like to be, but there is quite a lot in progress at the moment. So we are confident that our resources internally are being used effectively, and with the external procurement and a new starter, we should see some more rapid progress, which frankly we're very anxious to see get underway. The quality improvement plan, it doesn't look very long, and for those that were here after the last external assessment, it was pages and pages and pages of small, just making sure we were absolutely fully compliant with the public sector internal audit standards. The reason it's looking small is we have dealt with all of those outstanding actions that were in the quake previously. What's left now is just some updates to do, given our sort of change of approach post-COVID, and then some additional things that came out of our self-assessment this year that we're working on. We are, however, very happy to take on board any comments from the committee where they think there is something that either in terms of the papers and the information we produce, they would like to see us put more emphasis on or to include in the papers. So if there's anyone that anybody feels, if there is anything that anybody feels is missing, I'm really happy to take that forward and add it to our quality improvement plan. For the rest, I'll assume the papers are read and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from members on the papers?
So in terms of that particular incident, it is an external, the whistleblowing allegation was against an external provider, and it's a bit convoluted because the provider is not directly contracted to the combined authority, it's through one of our local authority partners. So they are looking at the financial irregularity aspect. We're waiting for the report back from them to see whether there are any concerns with that. What we have also agreed to do, though, in the nature of the investigation that came out, we did agree to pull forward the internal audit that we're going to do on the commissioning and VRU unit in the PCC team, just to make sure that the controls, etc., are functioning as they should be, and that the accountability between the council that have the contracts and the combined authority who pay the funds, just to make sure that all of those are well understood and clear. So there's more to report on that, but the investigation is ongoing. It's not a big contract, so it's not one that carries huge financial risk, but clearly reputational risk is something to consider.
Thank you. Any idea when that work's going to conclude?
It shouldn't take too long because the Home Office also have an interest, so they are pressing us for early resolution, and they do have oversight of this as well. So I don't think it'll take the relevant council, long to get back to us. Like I say, it's not a big piece of work, so we'd expect that to certainly be. We'd expect that aspect to be reported on at the next committee.
Lovely. So can that go on the forward plan? Yeah,
that's
thank
fine.
you. So that was one question. The other question was around the performance metrics. It might just be me, but I couldn't quite understand the percentage complete reviews where it says 4%. Could you just explain the target to me, please?
We have a finite number of audits on the plan. There are 27 actual audits on the plan. So it's literally the percentage of audits completed to that point. So it will always be an increasing figure as the year progresses. It's not an in-quarter figure. So it'll always be against the total number of audits in the plan. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and that's how I read it first. And then I looked back at the audits you're doing and are in progress, and it seemed that we've got more than 4% in progress.
We do, we definitely have. So that 4% is only finalised, completed reviews.
Okay, lovely, thank you. I don't think I've got any questions or comments in terms of the information we get. I think the information we're getting now is a lot clearer than it was. I think it gives us a lot more tangible information, but we might well come back to that later when we look at the work of the committee and reviewing what we do and how we do it, if that's okay. Yeah, lovely, thank you. Okay, so if there are no more questions, if we can just note that the committee's considered the report, please. So agenda item 6, that's the external audit progress report. Again, it's a standard agenda item, giving an update on external audit matters that have occurred since the last meeting. And also we've got the quality assurance improvement plan. I think the paper's quite succinct and self-explanatory, and I found the expanded audit follow-up information very useful, so thank you for that. Have any members got any questions on the paper? No? Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, just to say that there's been a couple of minor things since we published the papers, as there always is. The timing of things that come out from external audit, but one is just say that Mazars have formally advised us of the delay in the audit, which is being discussed and it's been considered by the committee before. So the formality is complete, but it doesn't change anything that has already been discussed here. Also, the work that PSAA are doing to recruit, to appoint auditors for the next round of audit appointments is progressing. There is yet still nothing for us to do, but that should be coming forward at some point soon, which obviously will come here when they advise us of what happens next.
Thank you for that. I've got a few questions, please. On the grant certifications, how do we know that every grant that requires certifying has been done? Because all this committee ever sees is the number that have been checked rather than checked versus what should have gone through, a percentage of it.
In terms of the ones that internal audit check, we only check those where the funding agreement requires internal audit to come through to those. There is, however, a grant register that records all the grants in the organisation. So there is a way to make sure that we are keeping a record of all the grant funding that's coming in. Some of those checks, they'll come through the finance team. Some of them, depending on the nature of the grant, might be the team responsible for that grant will just make the claims. It depends on the nature of it. But there should be a central record for reference back.
Okay, thank you. I suppose what I'm thinking is that we read the paper and it lists the grants that have been checked, but how does this committee know that there aren't 5 more out there that should have been checked that haven't been?
So those that have to be checked by us, the funders that require those claims to go back in with the checks, and I can attest to the fact they do chase when those don't come in. So the funders would be the ones that would alert the organisation to the fact that the grant certifications hadn't been done properly. So I think ultimately the funder is your red flag if there are any missing. I can't really think of any funding that wouldn't go, that required certification that wouldn't go back through the funders.
Okay, thank you, that makes sense. And then there's a query on the sampling. There's a note in the paper about the government looking at sampling of audits, and I just wondered if that's going to, what sort of impact that might have. 2.1 is this? Is it 2.1 in the paper? Questions on that agenda item? No. Okay. Thank you. No. Oh, right. Okay. We just, yeah. So,
Yeah, we can approve.
that's all right. Lovely. Thank you. Okay. So now, oh, lost myself. Then are we on 7?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, so agenda item 7, which is the draft management accounts. I think as this committee was informed at the last meeting, the draft accounts were to be published at the end of July for statutory inspection, and that period's now ended, and there are no questions or objections that have been raised. So, Angela, did you want to introduce this one and raise any points of note?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. At the last meeting, we brought these to you, but because of the timing of the meeting, you only had them for a couple of days before the meeting. We acknowledge there's been quite a delay, as previously discussed, before the external audit work starts. And there was a discussion amongst those here at the last meeting that it might be useful to put them on an agenda ahead of them coming for that final approval later in the year, when there will be the audit memorandum to accompany them. But an opportunity, if members did want to go through them in any more detail, that there was opportunity today for that to happen. So it's a brief covering report. There's a link provided to the published accounts, which went on deposit on time. As Chair said, we didn't have any. There were no questions from the public on them. Mazars have started some of their interim work and they have raised some questions, which the team are looking at. But they are really here. They're here to recognise that you will be asked to approve them in due course, with a full report supported by the auditors. But if in the meantime you have had any opportunity to read them, have any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Thank you. And is the intention still for this committee to sign them off at the first meeting of 2023?
It's unlikely to be the first meeting of 2023 because that meeting is, I think, the 12th of January. We have a meeting the 22nd of March, by which the auditor is nodding. But yes, that would definitely be achievable. If they ended up being ready significantly earlier than that, we could look to arrange an extraordinary meeting. But I think will be led by the audit work. The 22nd of March would be an acceptable date. It's past the deadline already by the time we get past November. So, but we really would like them done by the end of the financial year. So we'll pace that as we get to December, January, and we can advise you at the next committee how close or not we are probably to that completion of the audit work.
Thank you. Any questions from anybody on the paper? Scott.
Hi, it's Councillor Scott. Yeah, it's just a general comment. It's regarding the current financial climate that we're in at the moment. I think we've got the expected spending cuts to be announced in autumn, so we're going to have to really keep an eye on this.
Yeah.
So thank you for the report.
Any other questions? No. To ask on the accounts, I mean, there's a huge amount of information in there, as you would expect. And there are quite a few areas where we see underspend, we see overspend, etc. And I wonder as well about the impact of the potential clawing back of grants and things like that, so that there are questions within the accounts. So I'm just wondering how confident we are that all these different areas of expenditure are being rigorously scrutinised by committees within the combined authority, so that by the time they get to this committee we know that all those questions have been asked, or that this committee should be playing a more rigorous role in challenging the figures that we see, and equally that we can be confident actions to address overspend and underspend are being taken.
That's a very good question. Much of the monitoring that is done is around the budget. So we compare actuals against budget and forecast. The annual account takes a slightly different tack. There is a commonality that the result for the year is the same, obviously, in both the management accounts and the financial accounts. But so much of the information provided for the financial statement, which is as set out by all the guidance, all the regulations, is different to that which is reported on an ongoing basis. So I think there are elements in here that just don't see the light of day other than in the financial account, because they're not particularly helpful in an operational day-to-day management. I think it's an interesting challenge. Things like balance sheet, we don't regularly report on the balance sheet position. We report on treasury management, as this committee knows, and we report on under and overspend against different areas of the budget. And there is the finance resources and corporate committee keeps a close eye on that and oversees the budget process. Combined authority receives regular reports on spending. We bring a snapshot here as well, so you have visibility of that, I think, which hopefully helps when you get to the result for the year. But I think it's almost inevitable there are elements that are required to include in the financial accounts that won't be seen anywhere other than here. And perhaps the challenge you have just posed us is how we ensure that those areas are highlighted and that you are able to understand what we've done to ensure it's compliant, understand the assurances we can provide. But equally, if it's something that anyone on the committee would like, I suppose, further training on, for want of a better word, that's something we could look into.
Yeah, I think that would be useful. Thank you. Okay, so if there are no further questions that the committee has received and commented on the accounts, thank you. So agenda item 8, that's the update on treasury management. And again, a lot of detail in here. So Angela, can I come back to you, please, to highlight anything of note in there?
Thank you. We've brought you treasury management before, and I think following on from the session we had with our treasury advisors, it clearly was an area that the committee wanted more regular information on, and that certainly aligns with the requirements that are coming through for more reporting through to committee. So I think this report probably, to be fair, is a work in progress. I think we're developing it a bit iteratively, depending on the feedback we get each time from yourselves. And certainly the next iteration will be guided by some of the guidance that is coming out that is being evaluated at the moment so we need to ensure we are compliant with the information that we bring you. However, in the meantime, we're bringing this to you as a sort of half-year report because we are required at the moment to provide two reports on treasury management. We do one with the budget, and this is our sort of half-year one. So We've included in here a bit of a review of our capital expenditure and borrowing activities for last year. We've provided the information that we've had our regular quarterly updates with our Treasury advisors. The next one is actually is next week, so we're slightly out of kilter with those in terms of these meetings, but there was nothing of concern raised at the last meeting. We continue to have the usual challenge of our cash balances and the temporary cash balances we carry and what to do with those. But the appendix you've got here is the Treasury Management Statement, slightly updated with a bit of a review, and we've attached the current position on our borrowings and deposits. So it's there for information. At the moment, I'm not flagging anything of concern. We are in the midst of our budget process and planning and the development of the future capital programme, which may give rise to borrowing requirements, is part of that. So there may be some changes coming through in due course to the figures as we move more into a borrowing world, which is certainly something that one of the intentions is to help make our money go a bit further once we've got those capital pipelines of projects, is that we'll use some of the funding we've got to borrow for that. Clearly, it's a very interesting time to be undertaking Treasury management. Debt costs are changing, going upwards every day, but on the opposite side, we are starting to get some better returns on our cash balances. So short term, there's a little bit of a bonus for us, but it's longer term as we start to look to future capital programmes that the borrowing costs we will feel the difference, but we are in the position as all local authorities are borrowing long term. So it's 40, it can be, depending on the assets we're funding, it can be 30, 40 year debt. So it's long term, which smooths out the impact of even a small percentage change on interest rates is very small when you then put it across the 40 years. But we're very mindful of that, and we'll be bringing information back on that in January before we do the final budget in February.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Can you explain the term laddering, please? It's appeared a couple of times in that paper and I couldn't quite work it out.
So what it's I know what it is. I'm trying to think the best way to put it out. So at the moment we have cash balances in our bank account today. What we do is we put money on deposit in sort of quarterly lumps. So there's a lump of money for 3 months, another lump due at 6 months, another at 9 months, another at 12 months. So each quarter there's money coming back that we can then take a view. How long do we need this money soon, or can we reinvest it? So that the ladder is in effect those stages. It's whether ladder's the right word. I think it's a technical word in this space, but it is that always never being short, but also having the opportunity to put money longer term. And that's a policy that's certainly worked well for us over the last few years, that it's frequent enough that the money comes back into play, but equally long enough to lock in some decent rates. Although, again, that's changing by the day at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing I was wondering is that the paper does say that grant payments are giving a cash flow benefit. So I was just wondering how reliant the authority is on those grant payments to sustain a positive cash flow, and if clawback of those grants would then present a risk, especially if you're going to be borrowing against your cash.
The risk of clawback should be low, because we should be spending all that grant money in the right way, and we're always under pressure to make sure we are spending. I think we see it as a short-term bonus that we've got the cash balances, and we don't want to be in a position where we're reliant upon it, because in a perfect world, the money coming in, we are at the fully funded, the money coming in should match the money going out, and it is a timing difference. And with all the pressures in the world around us, we very much want to be spending the money where it's capital projects. We want to get those projects moving. We want the investment in the region to happen. We want the projects to happen. So I think we're not delaying delivery to keep the cash balances, and therefore we're not building an expectation of high income from our cash. Where we've got it, we'll take it as a short-term benefit. But we shouldn't have it clawed back. It's simply the timing of government giving us money at the start of the year that isn't profiled to be spent sometimes for another year or 2 years, depending on the way in which they give us instalments of funding against capital grants.
Okay. Thank you. And the only other thing I was sort of wondering is on the interest side of things, is interest allocated? So, for instance, you're investing money for LEP activities, for capital programmes. Does that interest go back to their balance, or is it a pooled reserve?
Good question. We treat it as a pooled reserve. We don't have many income lines that aren't already tied to something very specific, so it is an area that does give us a bit of opportunity. We have in the past, I think, when there was LEP funding, we're mindful of whether some of it belonged to LEP, but at the moment all funding is Combined Authority, so it's to the benefit of all the partners of the Combined Authority.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all my questions. Any questions from anybody else after that? No? Okay, thank you. So if we can move on to agenda item 9, and that's the work programme for the year in committee development. And that also includes the scheme of work to show what we expect to come through this committee. Can we add to that scheme of work the Police Joint Independent Audit and Ethics Committee annual report, which I believe should come here, shouldn't it?
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you. So just a word from me on this. I think everyone knows I've always been really keen to ensure that the work of this committee really does add value and avoids duplication, because there's a lot of work goes on in various committees around scrutiny. And certainly the questions that were raised by Mazar led me to think really long and hard about how this committee does discharge its duties and the sorts of activities we do and the questions that we're asking. And I would really like to be assured that by the time papers reach this committee, we can sign them off knowing there's been scrutiny at every level where it should have been had. And key to me is having clarity on the role of officers and the role that officers and committees play in terms of scrutiny, and receiving assurance that activity is actually happening. Also that we ask for the right information and that we're monitoring the risks that might impact the system of governance across the authority. So I think there's a lot of elements that we need to think about to hand on heart say we're really doing everything we can at this committee to discharge our duties properly. And this paper mentions that CITFA's updating its guidance, and I just think that's probably an ideal opportunity for us as a committee to take a step back and really look at what we do and how we do it. And I'd very much like to hold a workshop to consider some of this, and would welcome your opinion of whether you think that'll be valuable and if you'd like to participate in that. Happy to do. Lovely, thank you, that's good. I think it would be a really valuable piece of work to do. Good. So anybody got any comments or questions on the paper, or would the lead officer like to add anything to it? No? Lovely. So can we take an action then, please, to try and set a date up to put a workshop in? I'm not sure when the CITFA guidance will actually be published, and we'll need time to digest it as well, won't we?
It's not published yet, but when we do have copies, we can circulate that round to the committee outside of the meeting so that people have enough time to digest and consider it.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. Good. So agenda item 10, that's compliance and monitoring. And could I just ask the lead officer to take us through anything in that paper?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, your standard report on compliance and monitoring. So, firstly, on internal controls, I said there's been no significant changes. Key controls are up to date. Reference here to some compliance work going on financial controls that internal audit team are looking at, which was covered in bronze item earlier, and that will come back to a future committee when it's complete. The key indicators are not indicating any particular challenges, and there's been no RIDDOR health safety incidents to report. There's a brief update on Q1 finances. no surprise that there is obviously severe pressure on budgets across all organisations, public and private. We are no different. We are working through our budget at the moment. There's a number of swings both ways for the current year, so we're hoping that we'll be able to manage that, hope without having to dip into reserves. But next year is the significant challenge, and that work is underway in consultation and engagement with all local authorities as well. And there's a bit of an update then on the capital programme, which we set the indicative forecast in February. That's been revised downwards a little, and the spend to date is starting to happen. There is work underway to review the affordability of the full capital programme in the light of inflation. Again, that's a paper that will be going back to the Finance Committee in November, in effect to cut our collective cloth accordingly, that the projects were not designed up and approved with that capacity to absorb the scale of inflation that we're currently seeing. So measures in place to deal with that, but a significant capital programme still being delivered between us and our partners. And I will pause then, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from anybody on that? No? Can I just ask about looking at the capital programmes, there are some quite significant overspends and underspends on that. Is that just a timing issue?
Yes, there's always challenges on phasing of capital projects. Some of the projects, some of the funding is year specific, and we do need to try and achieve it in year, but much of it we have the opportunity to apply what are called flexibilities and freedoms to team and ladle a little bit between the capital pots. And we've set that out, I think, in some of the year-end reporting where we've been able to do that. It's extremely challenging bringing capital programmes to a dead stop on the 31st of March. And clearly, if we're in contract, the project's delivering and it slips over a little bit into the following year, it's in nobody's interest to try to cut that off, 95% complete. So we do end up with timing differences, but we do manage those through the different funding pots as best we can to make sure all the approved projects are able to be delivered.
Thank you. And I see the inflationary risk has ended up on the risk report, so that's good. It shows the system's working, and I'm assuming we'll see a revised budget for that once you've worked those through. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so if there are no further questions, we'll move on to our final agenda item, which is agenda item 11, and that's the update on risk management. So would it Bron, or is it you're going to take?
Yes, thank you. This is from our corporate performance team, but I've been asked to present it this morning, or this afternoon now. So the team have been on with reviewing our corporate risks. They're looking to update and refresh the risk management strategy, and there's been some recent appointments to that team, and they're working to ensure that we have a better understood and active process of risk management, so that the corporate risk register that you see coming through does pick up the issues as they come through. So that's certainly been improving and evolving. There was an internal audit report on risk management that gave some helpful recommendations to continue to improve it. So that work is underway, and it will come back to this committee as that risk management strategy develops. The work on the risk register itself, at 2.6, we highlight that we've added 4 new risks, partly around 2 of them are from inflation, 1 recognising capacity, which is also already in the risk register. I think every organisation, all our partners are struggling with recruitment, and most of us have vacancies, which means it's quite challenging to deliver everything that ambitious authorities want to do. Just saying that one risk has been removed because time has gone by now, and the LEP compliance with strengthening LEPs has been achieved. So they have so they're the updates. The full risk register is attached as the appendix, and there is included in there a bit of a direction of travel. So you'd asked previously to see a trend, so that is in there. It is still quite long, but hopefully it is fairly complete. We're trying to improve that the mitigations and are updated, and that the corporate performance team are now trying to ensure that they're chasing to ensure mitigations actually happen, and if any further action is required, particularly as risks remain very high and high. You would expect on the corporate risk register that the risks that are green don't appear on here. This is clearly the ones that are of importance to the organisation. So that's why it looks quite a heavy red amber list. But happy to try and take questions on this one if members have some.
Thank you. Any questions? No.
Oh, that's a challenging question. I think it's improving. I think one of the challenges we've often had is I think people know what risks are, they deal with risks, they don't always find a way to put them on paper, to share them, to make sure that intelligence is collected across the organisation. And that feels like it's starting to improve. We've set up that each directorate has a risk coordinator, so they're talking to each other. The risk coordinators are ensuring that each directorate is having regular sight. This feels, if I look back to the risk register of 2 years ago, this feels more mature, that it has been. It is reflecting changes. The ownerships are recognised, so I think it's better. I suspect on risk there's always more to be done, and it's part of your role, hopefully, to keep challenging us to keep doing more on it.
Thank you. Any other questions on that? No. I can I just make an observation? I think the separation of risks and issues is useful. I think that works far better. One query I do have is where the risks are rising. What we can't readily identify from this chart is whether additional mitigations are being taken in order to lower the level of risk. And I just wondered if we could either have a pre and post mitigation score, or even colour code the new mitigations that are being taken place, just so we can see actually what's being done to improve the situation.
That sounds very sensible. I will feed that back to the team to find a way that you can see where those mitigations and progress have changed. I'll leave them to find the best way to do it, but I understand what you're after.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, so if no further questions, no, I think that brings this meeting to a close then. Thank you very much.